My son and his wife refused to take me home from hospital after my surgery. But in evening, my name is Brenda, and at 67 years old, I never expected my own flesh and blood would abandon me after heart surgery. I sent a simple message to our family chat, asking who could pick me up. My son Daniel replied, "Call a taxi, I'm watching TV." His wife Amanda added, "Stay in the hospital for another month, it's so nice without you." They thought nothing of it until they turned on their television that evening. If you're watching this video, has your family ever let you down when you needed them most? Please like and subscribe to hear what happened next in my journey. I had been a widow for 10 years when all this happened. My husband William was taken from me in a car accident on a rainy Tuesday evening. The police said he never saw the truck that ran the red light. One moment we were planning our retirement, and the next I was planning his funeral. The loss nearly destroyed me, but I had our son Daniel to think about. He was 24 at the time, just finishing graduate school. William would have wanted me to stay strong for him. Daniel had always been the center of our world, an only child we poured everything into, giving him opportunities we never had. William worked 2 jobs, so we could afford to send Daniel to a good college without burdening him with loans. I remember the pride in William's eyes at Daniel's graduation, though he tried to hide his exhaustion from working overtime for years to make it happen. After William passed, Daniel and I grew even closer. Every Sunday he would come over for dinner, and we would talk about everything. His new job in marketing, his dating life, his dreams for the future. I cherished those Sundays, holding on to them as my anchor after losing William. Then Daniel met Amanda at a company function. She was beautiful, ambitious, and worked in the same marketing firm. The first few times Daniel brought her to dinner, she was charming, complimenting my cooking and asking about family photos. She seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. I was thrilled that Daniel had found someone who made him happy and who seemed to value family as much as we did. I even helped them with the down payment on their first home, using a significant portion of William's life insurance money. I wanted them to start their marriage without the financial stress that had marked the early years of mine and William's. Their house was only 15 minutes from mine, which seemed perfect. I imagined Sunday dinners continuing, perhaps eventually, with grandchildren around the table. The wedding was beautiful. Amanda looked radiant, and Daniel couldn't stop smiling. I sat in the front row alone, both proud and a little sad that William wasn't beside me to see our boy become a husband. During her vows, Amanda promised to cherish not just Daniel, but his family as well. I cried happy tears, feeling blessed that Daniel had found such a thoughtful partner. But something changed after they returned from their honeymoon. The Sunday dinners became less frequent. When I called, Amanda often answered, explaining that Daniel was busy or that they had other plans. When they did come over, Amanda would check her watch repeatedly, always finding a reason they needed to leave early. When I visited their home bringing homemade meals or small housewarming gifts, Amanda's smile never quite reached her eyes. She would take whatever I brought with a quick thanks before mentioning they were just heading out, or that she had work to catch up on. Soon my visits were met with annoyance barely disguised as politeness. I tried to give them space, understanding that newlyweds needed time to establish their own routines. But months passed, then a year, and the distance only grew. Daniel called less, visited less. When I did see him, he seemed different, more reserved, glancing at Amanda before answering my questions, as if seeking her approval. To fill my days, I started volunteering at the local library 3 times a week. There I met Barbara, Gloria, and Ruth, 3 women near my age who quickly became dear friends. We formed a book club meeting every Thursday evening in the small coffee shop next to the library. Those evenings became my new anchor. It was during one of those meetings that I first noticed the chest pain. Just a twinge at first, easily dismissed as indigestion from the coffee shop's rich pastries. But over the next few weeks it became more persistent, especially when I climbed the stairs at home or carried groceries from the car. Barbara insisted I see my doctor after I had to sit down midway through shelving books at the library, my face pale and clammy. The diagnosis came as a shock. I needed heart surgery, a triple bypass. My arteries were severely blocked, a ticking time bomb in my chest. I called Daniel immediately after leaving the doctor's office, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. He picked up on the third ring, sounding distracted. "Hey, Mom. I'm about to head into a meeting. Can I call you back?" "Daniel, I just left the doctor. I need heart surgery." There was a pause then. Heart surgery. Like serious heart surgery. Triple bypass. They want to do it next week. The doctor says it's urgent. Wow, that sounds serious. His voice lowered. "Have you thought about how you're going to handle this? I mean, recovery and everything?" I hadn't expected to discuss logistics immediately. I had called seeking comfort reassurance, maybe just to hear my son tell me everything would be all right. Instead, his first concern seemed to be whether he would need to help. "The doctor mentioned I'll need someone to drive me home after surgery and maybe some help for the first week or so," I said tentatively. "That's going to be tough with our schedules," he said quickly. "Amanda and I are both up for promotion, and the next few months are critical. Plus, we're looking at possibly refinancing the house." I heard Amanda's voice in the background asking who he was talking to. Daniel covered the phone partially, but I still heard him explain. Then Amanda's voice closer now, saying something about always something and convenient timing. "Mom, I need to go," Daniel said, coming back on the line. "We'll figure something out, okay? I'll talk to Amanda and call you back." He never called back. I left 2 voicemails over the next few days before finally sending a text. "Just checking if you had any thoughts about the surgery next week." His reply came hours later. "Still figuring things out. Crazy at work. Keep you posted." I didn't want to be a burden. I knew young couples needed to focus on their careers, their marriage, their future. But this was heart surgery. I was scared. And for the first time since William died, I felt truly alone. The next time I saw Daniel and Amanda was at my small pre-surgery dinner, which Barbara had insisted on hosting at her house. Daniel arrived late, Amanda later still explaining they had an important dinner with her boss that ran long. They stayed barely an hour, Amanda scrolling through her phone while Daniel asked perfunctory questions about the procedure. As they were leaving, I overheard Amanda in the hallway. "I told you this would take forever. Your mother always has to make everything dramatic." Daniel didn't defend me. He just urged her to lower her voice, glancing back to see if I had heard. Our eyes met briefly before he turned away, guiding Amanda out the door with a hand on her back. Standing there in Barbara's entryway watching my son choose his wife's irritation over his mother's fear, I felt something inside me crack. For the first time I allowed myself to acknowledge what I had been denying for years. My relationship with my son had fundamentally changed, and not for the better. The morning of my surgery arrived with a pale winter sun that did little to warm the chill in my bones. Barbara drove me to the hospital, waiting with me through the endless paperwork and preoperative tests. The nurse, a kind woman named Jessica, with laugh lines around her eyes, and a gentle touch, asked who would be taking me home after recovery. "My son," I said, more out of hope than certainty. Daniel hadn't confirmed, but surely he wouldn't leave me stranded. "He might not be here during the surgery, but he'll come when I'm ready to be discharged." Jessica nodded, noting it in my file. "We'll need his contact information then. Recovery takes time, and you'll need someone with you for at least the first few days at home." Barbara squeezed my hand. "Don't worry about that. Between me, Gloria, and Ruth, we've got you covered if Daniel is busy." I was grateful for Barbara's friendship, but her words stung. My son shouldn't be too busy for his mother's heart surgery. William would have moved heaven and earth to be there for Daniel if the situations were reversed. But I pushed the thought away. Daniel was young, building his career and marriage. I couldn't compare him to William, who had been nearly 20 years older when we had Daniel. As the orderlies came to wheel me to surgery, I checked my phone one last time. No messages from Daniel. I sent a quick text. "Going into surgery now. Love you." I waited a moment watching the screen, hoping for those 3 dots that would indicate he was typing a response. Nothing came. The operating room was blindingly bright and cold. The anesthesiologist explained what would happen as nurses bustled around attaching monitors and arranging instruments. I tried to focus on his words, but all I could think was that if something went wrong, if I didn't wake up, Daniel's last words to me would have been, "Still figuring things out." Count backward from 10 for me, the anesthesiologist said, placing a mask over my face. 10, 9, 8. The room began to blur. My last conscious thought was of Daniel as a little boy running into my arms after his first day of kindergarten, his face alight with stories to tell me. I woke disoriented, my throat raw from the breathing tube, my chest a mass of dull, throbbing pain. A different nurse was checking my vitals, adjusting something on the IV stand beside my bed. "There you are," she said, noticing my open eyes. "Surgery went well. You're in recovery now." I tried to speak, but only a dry rasp emerged. She offered me ice chips, explaining that the surgeon had successfully bypassed 3 blocked arteries. Everything had gone according to plan. The next few days passed in a haze of pain medication, vital checks, and brief shuffling walks down the hospital corridor with a nurse at my elbow. Barbara visited daily, bringing magazines and gentle gossip from the book club. Gloria and Ruth came together, smuggling in homemade soup that tasted infinitely better than the hospital's bland offerings. Daniel didn't visit. He called once the day after surgery, speaking quickly about how swamped he was at work, promising to try to stop by soon. I told him not to worry, that Barbara and the others were checking on me. I didn't want him to hear the hurt in my voice, the unspoken question: how could preparing a marketing presentation be more important than seeing your mother after heart surgery? 5 days after surgery, Dr. Matthews declared me ready for discharge the following morning. "You're recovering nicely," he said, reviewing my chart. "But remember, no driving for at least 2 weeks, no lifting anything heavier than 5 pounds, and someone needs to stay with you for the first few days." I nodded, already mentally calculating which friend I could impose upon. Barbara had mentioned her sister was visiting, Gloria had grandchildren staying over the weekend, and Ruth lived in a second-floor apartment with no elevator, impossible for me to navigate so soon after surgery. That evening, gathering my courage, I opened the family group chat on my phone. It was mostly dormant these days, occasionally used for obligatory birthday wishes or holiday coordination. With trembling fingers, I typed, "Who can pick me up from the hospital tomorrow morning? Doctor says I'm ready to go home." I stared at the screen, watching the message status change from delivered to read. Minutes ticked by with no response. Then Daniel's reply appeared, "Call a taxi, I'm watching TV." I blinked at the words, certain I had misunderstood. Before I could respond, another message popped up, this one from Amanda. "Stay in the hospital for another month. It's so nice without you." The phone slipped from my fingers onto the blanket. A taxi. After open heart surgery. And Amanda's message. There wasn't even an attempt to disguise the contempt, the clear implication that I was an unwelcome presence in their lives. Tears welled up, spilling down my cheeks before I could stop them. 10 years of widowhood had taught me to handle many things alone, but this casual cruelty from my only child and his wife cut deeper than the surgeon's scalpel had. The door to my room opened, and Jessica, the nurse from my admission day, entered with my evening medication. Seeing my tears, she set the small paper cup of pills aside and came to my bedside. "Mrs. Carter, what's wrong? Are you in pain?" I shook my head, unable to speak through the tightness in my throat. My phone still lay on the blanket, the screen displaying the family chat. Jessica glanced at it, then back at my face, understanding dawning in her eyes. "Your son?" she asked gently. I nodded, wiping at my tears with the back of my hand. "I don't have anyone to take me home tomorrow," I managed to say, the admission burning with humiliation. Jessica picked up my phone, her expression darkening as she read the messages. "This is your son and daughter-in-law?" she asked, her voice tight with controlled anger. "Yes," I whispered. She set the phone down carefully, as if afraid she might throw it if she held it any longer. "This is unacceptable," she said firmly. "You just had major heart surgery. You can't take a taxi alone." "I don't want to be a bother," I started, but Jessica cut me off. "You are not a bother. You are a patient who deserves care and respect." She paused, clearly thinking. "Let me talk to Charlotte, the charge nurse. We have resources for situations like this." As Jessica left the room, I sat in the dim light, feeling hollowed out. How had it come to this? When had my son become a man who would tell his mother to take a taxi home after heart surgery? What had I done to deserve such dismissal? The heart monitor beside me beeped a little faster as my pulse quickened with distress. I forced myself to take deep breaths, remembering Dr. Matthews' warnings about keeping my blood pressure stable. Stress was now my enemy, a fact that made the situation all the more cruel. My own family had become a health hazard. The next morning, I was sitting on the edge of the bed fully dressed, waiting for discharge, when Jessica came in, accompanied by a woman carrying a small recorder and notepad. "Mrs. Carter, this is Sarah Morgan from Channel 8 News," Jessica said. "She's doing a feature on elder care issues, and I thought you might be willing to talk with her." Sarah, a professional-looking woman in her 40s, with a warm smile extended her hand. "We're focusing on the challenges seniors face after hospital discharge," she explained. "Jessica mentioned you might have some insights." I hesitated, looking between them. "I'm not sure I have anything useful to contribute." "Your perspective as someone going through it right now would be incredibly valuable," Sarah encouraged. "We're trying to raise awareness about gaps in the system. Everything would be anonymous if you prefer." I wasn't interested in publicly criticizing my son despite his behavior. But the topic was important, and perhaps talking about the broader issues would help others. "As long as it's about the general problems, not my specific situation, I'm willing to help," I agreed. Sarah set up her recorder while Jessica helped me adjust my position to minimize discomfort. The interview began with standard questions about my surgery recovery expectations and concerns about returning home alone. "The medical care here has been excellent," I said truthfully. "But there's an assumption that everyone has a support network waiting at home. That's not always the case, especially for older people." "What arrangements have you made for your discharge today?" Sarah asked. "I'm still figuring that out," I said carefully, not wanting to mention Daniel's rejection. Sarah nodded sympathetically. "That's a common issue. Many seniors find themselves scrambling at the last minute when family support falls through." "Falls through." I repeated the phrase, striking me as too gentle for what had happened. Sometimes it's not that plans fall through. Sometimes there was never any intention to help in the first place. Sarah leaned forward slightly. "Can you elaborate on that?" I hadn't meant to get personal, but suddenly I was tired of protecting Daniel and Amanda's image at my expense. "This morning I asked my son if he could pick me up. He told me to call a taxi because he was watching television." Sarah's eyes widened. "Your son said that after heart surgery?" "Yes, and my daughter-in-law suggested I stay in the hospital another month because it's been nice without me around." Jessica, who had been quietly arranging my discharge papers, made a small angry sound. Sarah looked genuinely shocked. "Did you have a falling out recently?" she asked. "No," I said, feeling a strange calm overtake me. "This has been building for years. My son married a woman who sees me as an inconvenience. Gradually, he's adopted her view." Sarah's recorder continued to run as I found myself telling her about the growing distance, the canceled visits, the subtle ways I'd been pushed to the margins of their lives. I didn't mention Daniel or Amanda by name, nor did I share identifying details. But I spoke honestly about the pain of being discarded by the person I had centered my life around. "What will you do now?" Sarah asked finally. "What most of us do," I said with a sad smile. "Adapt and carry on. My friends will help where they can. I'll hire assistants for the rest. I just have to accept that the family I thought I had doesn't exist anymore." Sarah turned off her recorder, her expression troubled. "Thank you for sharing your story, Mrs. Carter. It highlights issues many seniors face, but few talk about openly." After she left, Jessica returned with Charlotte, the charge nurse, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s with short gray hair and kind eyes. "We've arranged for a hospital volunteer to drive you home," Charlotte explained. "And we've connected with a community service that provides post-discharge assistance for seniors. They'll have someone check on you daily for the first week." "That's very kind, but I can't afford home health care," I said, worried about the cost. "This isn't home health care," Charlotte clarified. "It's a volunteer program, no cost to you. and Jessica has offered to stop by on her way home from shifts as well. Overwhelmed by their kindness, I felt tears threatening again. "Why would you do this for me? You hardly know me." Jessica took my hand. "Because no one should be alone after what you've been through, Mrs. Carter. Both the surgery and your son's behavior." "Call me Brenda," I said, squeezing her hand weakly. "And thank you, both of you." The volunteer driver, a retired gentleman named Harold, helped me into his car with gentle efficiency, securing my small overnight bag in the trunk. The ride home was quiet, my mind too full of conflicting emotions to make conversation. Harold seemed to understand, filling the silence with soft, classical music from the radio. At home, he insisted on walking me to the door and carrying my bag inside, making sure I was safely settled before leaving. The house felt colder, emptier than ever. I made my way slowly to the living room couch, every movement a reminder of the trauma my body had endured. Sitting in the stillness of my empty house, the weight of Daniel's rejection crashed over me anew. I had raised him alone after William died, put his needs above my own, celebrated his successes as if they were my own. And in return, he couldn't spare an hour from watching television to ensure his mother got home safely after heart surgery. The phone rang, startling me from my dark thoughts. It was Barbara. "Brenda, are you home? How are you feeling?" I told her about the hospital's arrangements, carefully avoiding mention of Daniel's messages. But Barbara knew me too well. "Has Daniel been by or called to check on you at least?" "He's very busy," I said automatically, the excuse worn thin from overuse. Barbara's silence spoke volumes. "I'm coming over first thing tomorrow," she said finally. "Gloria and Ruth will be by in the afternoon. We'll set up a rotation." "You don't have to do that," I protested weakly. "We want to," Barbara insisted. "That's what friends do. Now get some rest. I'll bring breakfast tomorrow." After hanging up, I switched on the television for company, flipping to the local evening news out of habit. I was adjusting my pillows when I heard the news anchor say, "Coming up after the break, a disturbing story about elder abandonment in our own community. One woman's experience highlights a growing problem among seniors." I froze, remote control in hand. Surely they weren't referring to my interview Sarah had just done it this morning. There hadn't been time to produce a segment. But when the program returned from commercial I was on screen, looking pale and vulnerable in my hospital gown, speaking directly to the camera. They had moved quickly, editing the interview into a powerful 3-minute segment titled, "Abandoned After Surgery, a Community Crisis." Sarah's voiceover was sympathetic, but pointed. "Brenda, a 67-year-old grandmother, underwent triple bypass surgery last week. When it came time for discharge, she reached out to her only son for help." The screen showed a blurred image of a cell phone displaying text messages with certain words highlighted: "Call a taxi, I'm watching TV," and "Stay in the hospital for another month, it's so nice without you." My stomach dropped. They had shown the actual messages, though they had blurred out the names and profile pictures. Anyone who knew us might still recognize the context. Sarah continued. "With no family willing to help, hospital staff scrambled to find alternatives for Brenda, highlighting a growing problem facing our senior population." The segment included brief comments from Jessica and Charlotte about the challenges they regularly saw with discharged elderly patients, and statistics about senior isolation and abandonment. It ended with my own words, "I just have to accept that the family I thought I had doesn't exist anymore." I sat in stunned silence as the program moved on to weather. I hadn't expected this to air so quickly, or to be framed so pointedly. I hadn't given permission for them to show the text messages, though I hadn't explicitly asked them not to either. My phone began to ring. Daniel's name flashed on the screen. I stared at it, heart pounding painfully in my freshly repaired chest. After 6 rings, it went to voicemail. Seconds later, a text appeared. "What the hell, Mom, call me back now." Before I could process this, another text came through, this one from Amanda. "How dare you humiliate us on local TV? This is a new low even for you." The phone rang again. Not Daniel this time, but a number I didn't recognize. Then another, and another. My voicemail began filling with messages, my text inbox with notifications. Many were from strangers who had seen the news segment. "Stay strong, Brenda. You deserve better." My mother went through something similar. The doorbell rang, startling me so badly I gasped in pain. Holding my chest, I made my way slowly to the door, peering through the peephole to see my neighbors Troy and Diane Wilson standing on the porch with what looked like a casserole dish. I opened the door cautiously. "Brenda?" Diane said, her face full of concern. "We just saw you on the news. We had no idea you'd had surgery, let alone what happened afterward." "We brought dinner," Troy added, holding up the dish. "And we want you to know that if you need anything day or night, we're right across the street." They insisted on coming in, Diane settling me back on the couch while Troy put the casserole in the refrigerator. They stayed for nearly an hour, Diane making tea, and Troy checking that my doors were properly locked, my walkways clear of hazards that might cause a fall. As they were leaving, Diane pressed a piece of paper into my hand with their cell phone numbers. "Call any time," she insisted. "And we mean that." I thanked them, touched by their kindness, but overwhelmed by the day's events. My phone continued to ring and buzz with messages. Apparently, the segment was being shared widely on social media. Several local community groups had posted about it, expressing outrage and offering support. By 9 o'clock that evening, I was exhausted, my chest aching from the emotional turmoil on top of surgical pain. I turned my phone to silent and was about to head to bed when headlights swept across my living room window. A car door slammed, then another. Loud, angry knocking followed. Through the peephole, I saw Daniel and Amanda on my porch, their faces tight with anger. I considered not answering, but knew that would only delay the inevitable confrontation. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door. Daniel brushed past me into the house without waiting for an invitation, Amanda following close behind. Neither asked how I was feeling or showed any concern for my condition. "What were you thinking?" Daniel demanded, turning to face me as I slowly closed the door. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I did an interview about senior care issues," I said quietly, one hand pressed against my chest where pain was building. "You humiliated us on television," Amanda cut in, her voice sharp enough to make me wince. "Everyone we know saw it. My parents called, my boss called. Do you have any idea how this makes us look? How it makes you look?" I repeated, a spark of indignation cutting through my fatigue. "I didn't mention either of you by name." "You didn't have to," Daniel shouted. "They showed our text messages. Everyone knows it was us. Messages you actually sent," I pointed out, making my way carefully to the armchair. I needed to sit before my legs gave out. "I didn't fabricate anything." "You had no right to share private family communications," Amanda said, standing over me with her arms crossed. "This is a clear invasion of privacy." "I didn't provide those messages to the reporter," I said truthfully. "She must have seen them during the interview. And you just happened to have them open when a news reporter was there." Daniel's voice dripped with skepticism. "Come on, Mom. You orchestrated this whole thing to make us look bad." The unfairness of his accusation stung. "I was in a hospital bed after heart surgery, Daniel. The last thing on my mind was orchestrating a media hit piece against my son." "Then why do the interview at all?" he demanded. "Why not just call one of your friends if you needed a ride?" "The interview was about broader issues facing seniors," I explained, fighting to keep my voice steady. "And I did try to find other options, but it's not that simple when you've just had major surgery." Amanda made a dismissive noise. "There are services for that. Uber taxis, medical transport. You didn't need to guilt-trip Daniel into dropping everything." "Dropping everything," I repeated, incredulous. "He was watching television. It was the season finale of his favorite show." Amanda shot back as if that explained everything. I stared at them, these two people I barely recognized anymore. "Do you hear yourselves? I had open heart surgery. The doctor cut through my sternum, stopped my heart, and rerouted my blood vessels. And you're angry because an interview made you look bad for refusing to help me. You should have called me directly instead of that passive-aggressive group message." Daniel said, his tone slightly defensive now. "Would you have answered, Would you have come? I asked quietly. His hesitation was answer enough. We have our own lives, Brenda, Amanda said. We can't drop everything every time you have a problem. Every time? I echoed. This wasn't a flat tire or a leaky faucet. This was life-threatening surgery. You're being dramatic, Amanda said dismissively. Plenty of people have heart surgery. It's routine these days. My patience, already stretched thin by pain and exhaustion, finally snapped. Get out, I said quietly. Excuse me. Amanda looked shocked. I want you to leave my house, I said, my voice gaining strength. Both of you. Mom, Daniel started, but I cut him off. No, Daniel. I've spent years making excuses for your behavior, pretending not to notice how you've pulled away how Amanda treats me. I've blamed myself, wondered what I did wrong. But there's nothing wrong with expecting your only son to care enough to help you after surgery. We do care, Daniel protested weakly. No, you don't, I said sadly. If you cared, you wouldn't be here right now angry about a news segment. You'd be here because you were worried about me being alone after surgery. The fact that you're more concerned about your image than my health tells me everything I need to know. Amanda tugged at Daniel's arm. Let's go. She's clearly determined to play the victim. I looked at my daughter-in-law, really looked at her, seeing the contempt barely masked by a thin veneer of social propriety. I've never understood why you dislike me so much, I said honestly. What did I ever do to you, Amanda? She seemed startled by the direct question. You're always there, always hovering, always trying to insert yourself into our lives. I see my son once a month at most, I said. How is that hovering? It's not about frequency. It's about… She paused, searching for words. It's about the way Daniel changes around you, the guilt you make him feel, the obligations. I've never asked Daniel for anything, I said. Until now. And look how that turned out. Daniel stood awkwardly between us, looking from his wife to me and back again. This is getting us nowhere, he said finally. Mom, you need to issue a statement clarifying that you weren't trying to criticize us specifically. Something to cool this down. I stared at my son, this man I had raised, this stranger who couldn't see beyond his own embarrassment to recognize my pain. No, I said simply. What do you mean, no? He demanded. I mean, no, Daniel. I won't lie to protect you from the consequences of your own actions. His face hardened. Then I don't think we have anything more to say to each other. The words hit me like a physical blow. Are you cutting me off because I won't help you save face? You chose to humiliate us publicly, he said coldly. What did you expect? I expected my son to care that I almost died. I cried, the pain in my chest intensifying. I expected the boy I raised to show an ounce of compassion. Amanda pulled more insistently at Daniel's arm. We're done here. Let's go. Daniel hesitated, something flickering in his eyes. Regret, doubt. But it vanished quickly, replaced by the cool detachment I'd grown accustomed to seeing. Goodbye, Mom, he said stiffly. They left without another word, the door closing firmly behind them. I sat in the sudden silence, tears streaming down my face, my chest heaving with painful sobs. In the space of a week, I had survived heart surgery, only to have my heart broken in an entirely different way. The surgeon had repaired my physical damage, but who could repair this? I made my way to bed, eventually my body crying out for rest, even as my mind raced with the day's events. As I drifted into uneasy sleep, one thought circled endlessly. The family I had devoted my life to was gone, and I needed to find a way forward without them. The following morning, I woke to gentle knocking at my front door. Barbara stood on the porch, holding a bag of groceries and wearing an expression of fierce determination. I saw the news last night, she said without preamble. Why didn't you tell me what Daniel did? I stepped aside to let her in, too exhausted to pretend anymore. I was embarrassed, I admitted. What kind of mother raises a son who abandons her after surgery? Barbara set the groceries on the kitchen counter and turned to face me. The kind who raised a son who married the wrong woman, she said bluntly. This isn't about your parenting, Brenda. It's about Daniel's choices as an adult. She insisted on making breakfast, shooing me to the couch while she whipped up scrambled eggs and toast. As we ate, she filled me in on the community's reaction to the news segment. The Senior Center is organizing a support network for people in your situation, she explained. They're calling it Neighbors for Neighbors. The director wants to meet with you when you're feeling stronger. Me, why? Because your story struck a chord. You're not the only one going through this, Brenda. But you're the one who spoke up about it. The phone began ringing again, and Barbara insisted on answering. Most calls were from well-wishers offering support or practical help. Several were from media outlets seeking follow-up interviews, which Barbara politely declined on my behalf. You need to rest and recover, she insisted. The media circus can wait. By afternoon, Gloria and Ruth had arrived, turning my quiet home into a hub of activity. They organized my medications, prepared meals for the freezer, and took turns sitting with me, so I was never alone. Their chatter and laughter filled the empty spaces that Daniel's absence had left. In the days that followed, a steady stream of visitors arrived. Neighbors I barely knew brought food and offered rides to doctor appointments. The local church, though I wasn't a member, sent volunteers to help with household chores. Jessica, true to her word, stopped by after her shifts to check my incision and vital signs. A week after the news segment aired, Sarah Morgan called asking if I would be willing to do a follow-up piece about the community response. Still wary of media attention, I hesitated. This isn't about the family conflict, Sarah assured me. It's about how the community has stepped up. People are organizing similar networks in other neighborhoods based on what's happening here. You've started something important, Brenda. Reluctantly, I agreed. This time, Sarah came to my home filming as Barbara and the others moved comfortably through my kitchen, as neighbors dropped by with offers of help, as the director of the Senior Center outlined plans for the new support program. What do you think of all this? Sarah asked me on camera. I'm overwhelmed, I said honestly. A week ago, I felt completely alone. Now I have more support than I know what to do with. Has your son reached out since the first segment aired? I shook my head. No, and I don't expect him to. How do you feel about that? I considered the question carefully. Sad, I said finally. But I'm learning that family isn't just about blood. It's about who shows up when you need them. The segment aired that weekend, generating even more community interest. The Senior Center was flooded with volunteers for the Neighbors for Neighbors program. My story had touched something in people, reminding them of their own parents, grandparents, or future selves. Among the many people who reached out was Frank Dawson, a 70-year-old widower whose wife had died of cancer 2 years earlier. He volunteered through the Senior Center to help with home repairs, arriving at my door with a toolbox and a shy smile. I heard you might have some things that need fixing, he said. I was a contractor before I retired. Over the next few weeks, Frank became a regular visitor, replacing a leaky faucet, fixing a sticky door, installing grab bars in the bathroom for safety during my recovery. We fell into an easy friendship, sharing coffee after his work was done, talking about our late spouses, our lives before loss reshuffled the deck. Frank had 2 daughters who lived out of state, but called regularly and visited when they could. He listened without judgment as I told him about Daniel, offering neither platitudes nor condemnation. Grief changes people, he said one afternoon as we sat on the porch swing he'd repaired. Losing a parent, gaining a spouse, these are huge transitions. Some people don't navigate them well. Does that excuse what he did? I asked. Frank shook his head. No, nothing excuses cruelty, but understanding it might help you heal. As my physical strength returned, I found myself drawn to the work happening at the Senior Center. Barbara drove me there one day to meet with Elaine Porter, the director, a dynamic woman in her 60s with short silver hair and boundless energy. We've had an incredible response to the program, Elaine told me, but we need people who've been through it to help guide us. Would you consider leading a support group for seniors dealing with family estrangement? The idea was intimidating. I wasn't a counselor or social worker, but I knew firsthand the shame and isolation of being discarded by family. If sharing my experience could help others feel less alone, how could I refuse? The first meeting was small, just 5 of us sitting in a circle in the senior center's activity room. I shared my story, still painful to recount, despite the weeks that had passed. One by one, the others shared theirs. A grandfather whose son had cut contact after a political disagreement. A mother whose daughter blamed her for a difficult childhood. A father whose children were too busy with their own lives to visit more than once a year. Different circumstances, same pain. By the end of the session, there were tears, yes, but also laughter, and the unmistakable lightening that comes from knowing you're not alone in your struggle. Word spread. The next week, 12 people attended, then 20. We had to move to a larger room. People drove from neighboring towns to attend. Some local therapists offered pro bono sessions for group members who needed more intensive support. 2 months after my surgery, my story was picked up by a national news program doing a feature on elder isolation. This time I agreed to be interviewed not just as a victim of abandonment, but as an advocate working to create solutions. "Did you ever imagine that your personal crisis would lead to all this?" the interviewer asked, gesturing to the busy senior center around us. "Never," I admitted. "I was just a woman who needed a ride home from the hospital. Now I'm part of something much bigger than myself." The national exposure brought more attention to our program. Other communities reached out for guidance on starting their own networks. I found myself speaking on panels, consulting with senior service organizations, even testifying before the state legislature about the need for better post-discharge support for elderly patients. Through it all, my new circle of friends remained steadfast. Barbara, Gloria, and Ruth accompanied me to speaking engagements, cheering me on from the audience. Frank attended every support group meeting, not as a participant, but as my personal supporter, his steady presence, a comfort I came to rely on. And Daniel, 6 months passed without a word. No calls, no texts, not even a message through mutual acquaintances. It was as if he had decided that having a mother was simply too inconvenient, too complicated, too demanding of his attention. The pain of his absence never fully disappeared, but it changed shape over time, becoming less sharp, more of a dull ache that flared occasionally, but no longer dominated my days. I had built a new life different from what I had imagined, but fulfilling in its own way. Then one rainy Tuesday, eerily similar to the day William died, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Daniel standing alone on the porch. No Amanda in sight, his face drawn and uncertain. "Mom," he said simply, "can we talk?" I stood frozen in the doorway, staring at my son, as if he were an apparition. 6 months of silence, and now here he was on my porch, rain dampening his shoulders, his eyes holding a wariness I'd never seen before. "Alone," I finally asked, finding my voice. "Where's Amanda?" "At her mother's," he said. "She doesn't know I'm here." That should have been my first clue that something significant had changed, but I was too shocked by his presence to fully process it. I stepped aside, allowing him into the house where he'd grown up, the house he'd avoided for half a year. Daniel stood awkwardly in the entryway, looking around as if seeing the place for the first time. Perhaps in some ways he was. People often don't truly see what's familiar until they've been away from it. "You've changed things," he said, noticing the new curtains Frank had helped me hang the rearranged furniture that made navigation easier during my recovery. "A lot has changed," I replied, my voice carefully neutral. "Would you like some coffee?" He nodded, following me to the kitchen, where I busied myself with the coffee maker, grateful for the familiar routine that gave my shaking hands something to do. Daniel sat at the table, the same table where he'd eaten countless meals growing up, where he'd done homework, where we'd played board games on rainy days like this one. "You look good, Mom," he said, as I set a mug in front of him. "Healthy." "I am," I confirmed, taking the seat across from him. "The surgery was successful, no complications." An awkward silence fell between us. Once conversation had flowed easily between mother and son. Now we were like strangers making small talk at a bus stop, searching for safe topics. "I've seen you on TV," he finally said. "The senior program you started. It looks impressive." "It's been rewarding." I said, simply unwilling to share the details of my new life with someone who had chosen to absent himself from it. But I doubt you came here to discuss my volunteer work. Daniel stared into his coffee cup, as if the answers he sought might be found in its depths. I owe you an apology, he said finally, the words coming slowly, as if extracted with great effort. What Amanda and I did, it was wrong, inexcusable. I said nothing, waiting. An acknowledgement of wrongdoing was a start, but it wasn't enough, not after 6 months of silence. I've been doing a lot of thinking, he continued when I didn't respond. About the kind of person I've become, the kind of son, the kind of husband. He looked up, meeting my eyes directly. I don't like what I see, Mom. What changed? I asked. After 6 months, why come now? Daniel ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of his father that it made my heart ache. Amanda and I are separating, he said quietly. I moved out 3 weeks ago. The news shouldn't have surprised me, given what I knew of their relationship, yet it did. I'm sorry, I said automatically, the mother in me responding to my child's pain, regardless of our estrangement. Don't be, he said with a bitter laugh. It's been a long time coming. That day after we left here, I couldn't stop thinking about what you said, about caring more about our image than your health. It was true. And once I saw that truth, I started seeing others. He took a deep breath. Amanda never wanted me to have a relationship with you. At first it was subtle. Schedule conflicts, last-minute work emergencies when we were supposed to visit. But over time it became more obvious. She'd make cutting remarks about you, roll her eyes when I mentioned calling you act put out whenever family obligations came up. Why? I asked the question that had haunted me for years. Daniel shrugged helplessly. Control, I think. She wanted me all to herself with no competing loyalties, and I let her do it. I chose the path of least resistance, going along to keep the peace. Until now, I observed. Until I realized I was turning into someone I didn't recognize, he corrected. Someone who would tell his mother to take a taxi after heart surgery. Someone who would choose a TV show over basic human decency. The raw self-recrimination in his voice stirred my compassion, but I remained cautious. What do you want from me, Daniel? Nothing, he said quickly. That's not why I'm here. I don't expect forgiveness or for things to go back to how they were. I just needed you to know that I understand what I did, and I'm deeply, profoundly sorry. I studied my son's face, seeing traces of the boy he had been, the man he was becoming. Thank you for saying that, I said finally. It means something to hear it. I'd like to try to make amends, he added hesitantly. If you're open to it. Not all at once. Maybe we could start small. A phone call now and then. Coffee sometime. The Daniel of 6 months ago would have demanded immediate absolution and erasure of his transgressions without the messy work of rebuilding trust. This new humility suggested genuine change, but I had learned the hard way not to let hope override wisdom. I'd be open to that, I said carefully. But Daniel, I need you to understand something. My life has changed. I've built new relationships, new routines. I won't abandon those to return to how things were before. I wouldn't expect you to, he said, seeming genuinely surprised. From what I've seen, you've created something remarkable. I'm proud of you, Mom. The words, so simple yet so long absent from our relationship, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Thank you, I whispered. Is one of those new relationships with the older gentleman I've seen with you on TV? Daniel asked, a hint of his old teasing tone emerging. The one who looks at you like you hang the moon. I felt a blush rise to my cheeks. Frank is a good friend. He's been very supportive. Daniel smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him in years. Good. You deserve someone who sees your worth. We talked for another hour, tentatively at first, then with growing ease. He told me more about the separation, how he'd finally confronted Amanda about her treatment of me and others in his life, how she'd reacted with fury rather than remorse. I shared some details about the senior network, my support group, my speaking engagements. When he finally rose to leave, he hesitated at the door. "Would it be okay if I called you next week?" he asked, uncertainty in his voice. "Maybe we could have lunch." "I'd like that," I said, meaning it. He nodded, relief visible on his face. "I know I have a lot to make up for. I'm going to try if you'll let me." "One step at a time," I said gently. "That's all any of us can do." After he left, I sat for a long time in the quiet house processing what had just occurred. A door I thought permanently closed had opened just a crack. Not enough to walk through, perhaps, but enough to let in a sliver of light. When Frank called that evening, as he did most evenings now, I told him about Daniel's visit. "Are you okay?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. "Do you want me to come over?" "I'm all right," I assured him. "Actually, I feel lighter somehow. Not because everything's fixed, but because I didn't need it to be." "What do you mean?" 6 months ago, I would have given anything to have my son back in my life. It was all I wanted, all I could think about. But now, it's nice that he came, that he apologized. But my happiness doesn't depend on him anymore. I've found other sources of joy, other connections. Frank's voice warmed. "You've done more than survive this ordeal, Brenda. You've transformed it into something meaningful, not just for yourself, but for countless others." His words stayed with me as I prepared for bed that night. Looking in the bathroom mirror, I saw a different woman than the one who had gone into heart surgery half a year earlier. Not just physically different with the fading scar down my chest, but changed in more fundamental ways. Stronger, more certain of my worth. Less willing to accept scraps of affection where a feast was deserved. The heart that had been surgically repaired had healed in more ways than one. The chambers that had been blocked were now open, allowing not just blood, but love, purpose, and self-respect to flow freely. The crisis that might have destroyed me had instead revealed strengths I never knew I possessed. As I drifted toward sleep, I thought about the journey ahead. Rebuilding a relationship with Daniel would take time and care. My work with the senior network was expanding, demanding more of my energy and attention. And then there was Frank, whose friendship had blossomed into something neither of us had expected to find at our age. The future held no guarantees. Another health crisis could arise. Daniel might struggle to maintain his newfound insight. The senior program might face funding challenges. But whatever came, I would face it knowing my own resilience, surrounded by people who had chosen to be in my life, rather than those bound only by obligation. Sometimes life's deepest wounds lead to unexpected healing. My broken heart, both literal and figurative, had mended into something stronger than before. Not because the pain hadn't been real, but because I had allowed it to transform, rather than define me. Sometimes the family we choose matters more than the family we're born into. And sometimes the most profound act of self-love is recognizing when to let go of those who cannot or will not value us as we deserve. If you've ever felt abandoned by those who should have cared the most, know that you're not alone. There are communities waiting to welcome you, new connections to be forged, purpose to be found beyond the narrow confines of relationships that no longer serve you. Have you found your chosen family? Please share your story in the comments below. Subscribe to hear more journeys of healing and transformation, and remember to like this video if it resonated with you. Your experience might be the lifeline someone else needs right now. Thank you for listening, and may you find the strength to create your own path forward, just as I did.